Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode I'm going to share with you some common misconceptions about the oh-so-infamous Vlad the Impaler, predominantly focusing on what you read about him in VTM books or hear about him on VTM lore channels. I have said before that supplements such as Transylvania by Night have given this region and its historical characters as much care for historical fact as possible, which is something I appreciate a lot, but the bibliography used in those books is indeed outdated. It's from a time in which it was quite difficult to verify certain sources, and even in real life there were a lot of misconceptions going around, as there are today, sadly. As a matter of fact, according to historian and researcher Liviu Cîmpeanu, almost no one has bothered properly checking the historical sources for Vlad Dracul, for instance, since 1928, when Ilie Minea published the monograph Vlad Dracul și vremea sa. But nowadays, thanks to initiatives such as Corpus Draculianum and researcher historians such as Adrian Gheorghe, Liviu Cîmpeanu, whom I've already mentioned, or Andrei Pogaciaș, we can at least try to understand why some sources might not be as reliable as previously thought, and hopefully paint a more accurate historical picture of a voivode who has become undying myth. At the very least, we can debunk a lot of folk stories about both Vlad Dracul and his son, Vlad the Impaler, folk stories which really have no historical proof. Though I have been doing ample research on the topic for a while now, I don't want to bore you with minutiae, at least in this episode, so we'll just go over the most common misconceptions for now. Let's get right to it. The vampire book series Transylvania Chronicles makes one thing clear, and I'm happy that's the case. Both Vlad II, aka Vlad Dracul, and Vlad III, aka Vlad Țepeș Drăculea, ruled in Țara Românească, aka Wallachia. He did not rule in Transylvania in any shape or form. At that time, during the reigns of Vlad II and Vlad Țepeș, Transylvania belonged to the Kingdom of Hungary and was governed by regent/governor/voivode Hunyadi János, and later on ruled by Matthias Corvinus, aka Hunyadi Mátyás, the second son of Hunyadi János. Not a single member of the Drăculești family ruled Transylvania. And if any of the listeners out there are fans of black metal, know that the band Marduk wrote a really nice song called Dracul va domni din nou în Transilvania, and, well, it's a nice song, but they got the region wrong. The Drăculești ruled in Wallachia. Since I mentioned the Drăculești, it's worth noting a lot of lore channels and lore books as well use this phrase, like, even as an ordinary mortal, Vlad Țepeș did this and that. Well, was he an ordinary mortal? At this point, I will blend history with VTM lore. The Drăculești were descendants of the House of Basarab, which is true historically, and according to vampire lore, we know the Basarab were a revenant family. Revenants. Servants of the Zimiții who had the ability to produce their own vitae. Vlad Țepeș and even his father had never been just ordinary mortals, but they were already supernatural in some ways. Now, Transylvania by Night also says the Basarab were wiped out by the Zimiții lords after Țepeș diablerized Tabac and went on a little crusade against the Transylvania fiends, but the House of Basarab had already broken off into the House of Drăculești with Vlad II, who was the descendant of Mircea cel Bătrân, and the House of Dănești with Dan I, who was Mircea cel Bătrân's brother. Also, interesting mention here, cel Bătrân means the old one. So Vlad II's father was Mircea the Old, or the eldest. Gotta love it when that happens. But back to the topic at hand. Make no mistake, these two houses were still descendants of the Basarab family, but they had their own distinct names and coats of arms, and funny enough, both of these houses will be extinguished. The Dănești die out by 1530, and the Drăculești die out by 1660. But my point here is, it's not very likely that the Impaler's diablerie of Tabac is the actual reason for the downfall of the House of Basarab, but if the lore says that's how it is, then that's how it is in VTM. And I must say, it's a very interesting fictional take on the history of these houses. What I don't like, however, and I don't like this at all, is the idea we find in Transylvania by Night that Basarab held small manors in Transylvania. No, not really. The Basarab were the Wallachian rulers, not minor nobility, so they held a lot more than a few manors in Transylvania, that's for sure. That being said, Vlad II and his son, the Impaler, had never been ordinary mortals, so that's out of the way. We set the lore aside and ask ourselves, where did they get the nicknames? Why is Vlad II known as Dracul? And to this question, a lot of people, including the VTM books, say, well, he was a member of the Order of the Dragon. Was he, though? See, the issue here is, 1. He isn't found on any attested list of members. 2. There was only one original source for this, the Chronicle of Eberhard auch Windeke. And 3. That source doesn't actually name a single Vlad. Romanian historians who initially read this text must have made an unwilling or a willing mistake in associating Vlad II with the Order of the Dragon. The source was initially written in Latin and then translated into medieval German, Eberhard being contemporary to the very events he is chronicling. According to Liviu Cîmpeanu, there are no omissions in the translation, which is great, and what Windeke says is that the individual who visited Nuremberg and was welcome into the order was a Mircea Vodă, son of Pangrațius the Wise. Pangratz the Wise. Who are these two characters we read of? Well, we don't know. After Mircea the Eldest, whom I've already mentioned, we don't get another Mircea ruler until 1442, a Mircea who is one of the sons of Vlad II, aka Vlad Dracul, but this clearly isn't the character we're after. This Mircea only ruled for a few months in absence of his father. Mircea the Eldest, the father of Vlad Dracul, is the son of Radu I, no Pangrațius. Windeke tells us that this Mircea individual turned his back on the order and Sigismund like a whore son, allied with the Turks, and banished the local crusaders, which must have been the Teutonic Knights. But it was Alexandru Aldea who did all of that, not Mircea. So then, it's really hard to identify the individual Windeke is referring to. It's not a Vlad, it's not a Mircea. And keep in mind, Windeke was contemporary with these events he is chronicling, so if he didn't get it right, probably no one did. Then people say, but wait, we have Wallachian coins which have the dragon on them. Certainly numismatics can back up the fact that Vlad II was in the Order of the Dragon. Yes, and according to Adrian Gheorghe, the same coins are found in the Kopicki catalog, which presents Polish coins of the same period. The coins we are referring to have no writing on them, just the motif. So where were they made? Because coins travel. Just because you see an ox on a coin doesn't automatically mean it's a Moldavian coin. Plus, there are multiple noble families which have the same motif on their coins. The Batories also have a coin depicting a dragon strangling itself with its own tail. And by the way, the logo of the order, if we can call it that, seems to be a dragon strangling itself with its own tail, not devouring it. This is just a quick curiosity for you. So the dragon coin idea is also on shaky ground. And then we know of properly attested Hungarian voivodes who were part of the order, and at a later time, that includes a Batory. We know of a Serbian voivode who was part of the order, and many others, but they don't have the nickname Dracul in the sense of dragon. So why would Vlad II have it? But in Romanian, drac also means devil. So maybe the nickname refers to a deceptive and cruel individual. Even today we have sayings like "Ce-al dracului e" or "Ăsta-i dat dracu," which refers to someone who is either cruel or a badass. Now, just because I think it's worth mentioning, even had the sources named a Vlad, we would have had a difficult time identifying which Vlad, because within the Basarab line and its offshoots, there have been many Vlads. And in other nations' histories, rulers with the same name are differenced by numbers. You have Vladislav II, or Henry VIII, or Louis XI, and so on. But when it comes to Wallachia, they have nicknames. And some were even brothers, pretenders for the throne at the same time. They lived in the same time. So which Vlad are we talking about? Well, for your entertainment, here's a few Vlads. Vlad the Usurper, Vlad Dracul, Vlad Țepeș, Vlad the Monk, brother of Vlad Țepeș, Vlad the Young, and Vlad the Drowned. And this is only 130 years worth of Vlads. See, the thing in Wallachia was that the monarchy wasn't strictly hereditary, with the oldest brother automatically inheriting the throne, but also elective, with the Council of Boyars having power and privilege to choose which member of the dynastic family gets the throne, which member gets their support, their backing. So, if the older Vlad isn't careful, his younger brother might get the throne instead, if that younger Vlad is more to the boyar's liking. For those listeners who have read the Zimici clan book, now you understand why the title of boyar has so much weight. These guys had a lot of political power. But I digress. So, Vlad Dracul might not have been a member of the Order of the Dragon, but instead he was just one bad son of a bitch. And for a long time, especially during the dictatorship here in Romania, it was propagated that Dracul is a misspelling of the word dragul, where drag means dear one or even beloved. So the point was he was so beloved by his people that they called him Vlad the Beloved One, which clearly was a fabrication of the nationalist propaganda of those times. When it comes to Vlad the Impaler, however, it's pretty clear how he got his name. He impaled people. And for a long time it was believed he impaled anyone or anything he could get his hands on. But sources never mention impaling those of royal blood, and to a large extent, even boyars. There are no sources attesting the impaling of any members of the dynasty of Basarab or whatever other royal families or boyars. He certainly impaled anyone and anything in the villages or cities he raided, both in Transylvania and south of the Danube. He impaled the Ottomans. Even if some were already dead, nothing stopped him from impaling the corpses and putting them on display. He impaled the Transylvanian Saxons, the burghers and merchants, especially those from my hometown of Brașov. But most importantly, he impaled the council members of Târgoviște, whose status was probably exaggerated by Saxon writings of those times to make it look like he was a madman and a tyrant with no respect for the law. Was he cruel? Yes, absolutely. But again, he knew how to choose his victims. According to the Wallachian Chronicles, which were written about 200 years after the events, it is said he discovered that the boyars of Târgoviște used the patricians, the burghers of Târgoviște, to torture, bind, and bury his brother Mircea alive. Quick note, this is the same Mircea II, who ruled very briefly in 1442, and he is killed in 1446. The chronicle then says Vlad knew this to be true because he searched the grave and found his brother face down. So he found the Târgovișteni when they were enjoying the Easter banquets and festivities. He impaled the elders and put them around town, and the younger, with their wives and children, including virgin daughters, he took to Poenari by force in their Easter clothes to labor on the castle until their clothes tattered on their bodies. So the Chronicle says it was this Easter slaughter which earned him the nickname the Impaler. Then, the Vampire the Masquerade Transylvania Chronicles books would have you believe there weren't a lot of fortifications in Wallachia, that this place was a wild land of sorts, and this couldn't be further from the truth. You know, there were rulers and voivodes before the two infamous Vlads, with considerably more stable and diplomatic reigns, and they built plenty of fortifications, which were maintained by the men stationed there. The roads themselves were not filled with random bandits, okay? Had this region been so unimaginably chaotically dangerous, the Transylvanian merchants would not have requested free of charge passage through Wallachia, which they did request in order to have access to the Danube. Certainly, there were plenty of dangers, mainly in the form of enemy raids, and Vlad himself executed plenty of raids in Transylvania, which he then used as an excuse not to pay tribute to the Sultan. And then he raided south of the Danube in the hopes of getting help from Hungary or other European forces so he can fight against the Ottomans. The situation, however, was not peachy at all. You see, Vampire the Masquerade would have you believe that Vlad the Impaler is this master manipulator who actively pitted Hungary against the Ottomans for some unexplained reason. Not so. In truth, both Vlad Țepeș and his father, Vlad Dracul, were caught between a rock and a really hard place. Because they were always someone's vassal. If the Ottomans helped you obtain your rule, then they want you to be loyal to them, pay tribute, allow their troops passage, offer no aid to their European enemies, and so on. But in the meantime, you have Europe organizing crusades against the Ottomans, and they want to pass through your lands as well to fight their enemies, the Ottomans. If you don't give them that, well, they might raid you. Similarly, if you obtain the rule with the aid of other Transylvanian rulers, you're expected to aid them, earning you the disfavor of the Ottomans. So both Dracul and Țepeș are really stuck, trying to make alliances and figure out if they can actively rely on some allies who might withdraw their help when things get hairy, which is something that happened indeed. And at the same time, you have to appease the Ottomans who want tribute and loyalty, and if you don't offer those things, they will mess you up like you have no idea. Besides all of these external threats, there's internal threats. There's the boyars who might support other pretenders to the throne, because, like I said, they can elect someone else who is of dynastic blood. They seek to usurp your rule and so on. And there might be merchants who refuse to sell you what you need because you revoked their tax privileges, etc. So the situation is about as nasty as it can be, and to be fair, Vlad Țepeș might have fought hard, but he wasn't the best diplomat. Vlad II did the best he could, but Țepeș, well, he didn't think things through too much. I digress. My point here is there are no random peasant bandits going around looting anything. That's the least of your worries. And second, Vlad didn't pit anyone against anyone. He himself was caught in a much larger conflict. Then, there's two more things worth mentioning in regards to VTM. First, Vlad's axes kidnapping young boys. In the VTM Transylvania Chronicles, there is this moment when Vlad kidnaps and plans to sacrifice 100 boys to bind Kupala, or something of the like. Historically speaking, the reason why he would take young boys would be to give them to the Ottomans. One researcher says, according to Byzantine chronicler Laonikos Kalkokondiles, some boyars who were opposed to Vlad sent word to the Sultan that the real reason he isn't paying tribute isn't because he can't, because those raids on Transylvania were costly, but because he just doesn't want to. So the Sultan, who had postponed receiving tribute from Vlad for a few years, sends word that he wants his tribute now. And because he's been so understanding, he also wants 500 boys for his patience. What for? Well, to train them and integrate them into his army, of course. According to historian Constantin Giurescu, Vlad brought only 50 boys and the tribute, knowing that he would be ambushed because his diplomacy might have been lacking, but he had plenty of spies. He surprised the Sultan's detachment, captured them along with Hamza Bey, who was tasked with protecting the emissaries. He took them to Târgoviște and did what? Let me hear you. Impaled them, of course. So this is probably where the writers got the idea that Vlad is kidnapping children. According to another researcher I've been following, this event was not recorded by Calcocondiles but Ducas, who makes it clear that this is a solitary occurrence when it comes to Wallachia. So the reason the Sultan wanted those 500 boys was to punish Vlad for not paying tribute on time and for going behind his back. When I was growing up, the history books made it seem like this was a regular occurrence and Wallachia had to give 500 boys every year or every 2 years, but this really isn't the case. It seems the boys were taken from territories which were under the direct administration of the Ottomans, and this is not the case for Wallachia. Second thing worth mentioning, and this is completely without fault from the writers, since there are real-life people who believe and market Bran Castle as if it were the residence of Vlad Țepeș. Bran was not his residence, okay? The castle was built in 1377 by Transylvanian Saxons from Țara Bârsei and was in Mircea cel Bătrân's possession for a few years. Then it was controlled by Transylvanians who used it as a customs point with Wallachia, and Vlad Țepeș probably passed by quite a few times, but there are no sources to indicate he even visited Bran Castle, let alone reside there. He had plenty of enemies in Transylvania and the castle was not his, so there's no reason why he would put himself in danger and stay there. Alright, because the Saxons really couldn't stand him since he raided them like 5 times and he impaled them left and right. So they wouldn't have invited him there for any reason, that's for sure. Now, when it comes to Poenari, he extended the fortifications there, but he didn't build it from scratch, right? This is the one he built using forced labor, the burghers of Târgoviște. And it's very likely that Poenari served not as a residence, but as a treasury, or maybe like a sort of a dungeon for important political captives. Because the issue is, Poenari is really high up. Like, there's about 1,500 stairs you have to climb to reach it. So it makes no sense to have that place as a residence, but maybe as a refuge, if need be. Then there's this idea that Vlad was born in Sighișoara, but again, there are no sources for that. What's clear is he held court in Târgoviște, and then he moved court to Bucharest. And probably the last thing I want to discuss this episode is an idea which has been propagated by other lore channels whose name shall not be named at this time, since it's not their fault, as stated before. This is an idea found in Son of the Dragon, the second book of VTM Transylvania Chronicles, in the characters chapter. There's no mention there that Vlad the Impaler had 3 separate reigns. His first reign in 1448 being only 2 months long, alright? The guy had 3 reigns, of which the second is most juicy and significant. But in the VTM books, we are told he and Hunyadi János mount a crusade against the Ottomans and push the Ottomans all the way back to Constantinople, which is completely insane. Hunyadi János, or Iancu de Hunedoara as we call him, fought in the Varna Crusade, 1444, that is correct, but he was aided by Mircea II, Vlad Dracul's son and Vlad the Impaler's older brother, Mircea II being the one who was buried alive. Now, the Varna Crusade, they lost. Then Vlad II detained Hunya de János, probably because he was afraid of the repercussions from the Ottomans, since he assisted the Christians in their crusade against them, and probably wanted to have a bargaining chip in holding Iancu, but he subsequently released him. Then Vlad fights on the side of the Ottomans after his sons Vlad III and Radu are taken as political prisoners. In 1445, Vlad Dracul is banished from the Wallachian throne and Iancu replaces him with Basarab II, son of Dan II. But Dracul comes back, assisted by the Ottomans, and takes his throne again, only to be killed in 1447 in Bălteni. Vlad Dracul is decapitated, and Mircea is tortured, blinded, and buried alive, which is not how royalty should have been executed, right? The only dignified way to die is by the sword. So it's no wonder Vlad Țepeș is so pissed and impales all those Târgovișteni first chance he gets. Ironically, Vlad the Impaler does take the throne with the aid of Iancu, his father's enemy, the very same Iancu who was imprisoned by Vlad II. And Iancu dies from the plague in 1456 as Vlad the Impaler begins his second reign, the one during which he does all of the cool stuff and fights the Ottomans. But yes, Vlad and Iancu did not fight side by side. They absolutely did not send the Ottomans cowering behind the walls of Constantinople during Vlad's second reign. So this is completely inaccurate on behalf of VTM. It's fantasy. And, well, there are a lot of details that are inaccurate. This idea that Vlad the Impaler held court in Argeș, which is not the case. That was the capital and court from the time of Basarab I to the time of Mircea cel Bătrân, and then it was moved to Târgoviște. What else? The idea that Hunya de János dies in 1466, which is about 10 years too late, an idea which is found in the appendix/chronology of the book. And then we can clearly see some names are being confused with others, misused, and, well, many things like this that are either historically inaccurate or they are factually wrong, contradicted by multiple real-life sources, or they fall under the category of folklore, urban myth, and cannot be proven by the sources we have. That being said, I want to mention that these books, Transylvania by Night and the Transylvania Chronicles for Vampire the Masquerade, came out before the dawn of the internet, which facilitates research and fact-checking and facilitates dialogue with historians and researchers and people who actually know what they're talking about. So, should we bash these books and throw them on the fire because of their inaccuracies? Far from it. Not at all. Honestly, I am still surprised the books are at least as accurate as they are, considering when they came out. I'm happy I have the opportunity to bring these mistakes to your attention and talk about history within the context of VTM in a positive manner. I hope. I mean, I know I'm certainly enjoying this, and I hope you're enjoying this too. Lastly, I think each storyteller is absolutely free to have as much historical accuracy as they want in their Dark Ages games. Some more, some less. It's fine, unless the inaccuracies are so numerous that they are immersion breaking for the players, or they actively upset the players in some way. Like saying torches were used as indoor lighting. That one always gets to me. No, they weren't. Oil lamps were a thing since antiquity. Anyhow, let me know if you have questions on this topic, the two infamous Vlads, or if there's other related things you want me to cover in future vampire episodes. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.